Today you are going to learn how to compare fractions with unlike denominators. Isabel's father is building a model dinosaur with small pieces of wood. Compare the lengths of the pieces of wood. Compare 1/4 inch and 5/6 inch. Then compare 4/5 and 4/10. We know that if we have a fraction with the same denominator, for example 1/6 and 2/6, 2/6 will be greater than 1/6 because 2 pieces out of 6 is going to be more than 1 out of 6. If we have fractions with unlike denominators, there are two different ways you can compare them. One way is that you can change the bottom so they have the same denominator. So for example, it says to compare 1/4 and 5/6. If I look at 1/4 and 5/6, they have different denominators. Here we have a 4 and here we have a 6. So we have to make them equal. One way to do that is to find a multiple that they share. So I know that they can both go into 12. They're both factors of 12. So in order to do that, I'm going to change the bottom to 12. And I have to think, how did I get from 4 to 12? Well, I multiplied by 3. And since I multiplied by 3, I'm going to multiply 1 by 3. And so my top number is going to be a 3. So I know now that 1/4, let me fix that. I know now that 1/4 and 3/12 are equivalent fractions. They're the same. So now I have to change the bottom one, the other fraction, and I have 5/6. Well, I think, how did I get from 6 to 12? Well, I multiplied by 2. So now I have to multiply the top by 2 to create an equivalent fraction. And 5 times 2 is 10. I know that 5/6 and 10/12 are the same. By looking at these numbers, they both have 12 as the denominator and 10 is more than 3. So I know that 10/12 is going to be greater than 3/12, and therefore 5/6 is going to be greater than 1/4. That's a lot of work. So I'm going to show you a trick. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do it over here where I have room. If I'm going to compare 1/4 and 5/6, I'm going to write down 1/4 and 5/6. Instead of changing the denominators and do all that, I learned a trick, and you're going to love it. First, you're going to cross multiply. So we are going to multiply 4 times 5, and 4 times 5 is 20. And 1 times 6 is 6. Whatever fraction has the bigger number on top, so in this case it's 20, I know that 5/6 is going to be greater than 1/4. That is a lot easier than trying to change the denominators. If we think about it, I'm going to make a little spot over here. If I have 1/4 and 5/6, I know that 1/4 is going to be less than a half, because a half is 1/2, which would be 2/4. So this is going to be less than a half. And if I look at 5/6, I know 5/6 is going to be greater than a half, because half of 6 is 3. So I automatically know that 5/6 is going to be greater. So there's another way that you can compare the fractions. Now it asks us to compare 4/5 and 4/10. I'm going to go on another page to do that. So I have 4/5 and 4/10. Well, looking at these numbers, I know that with 4/5, the pieces are going to be bigger. And if I have 4 out of 5, these pieces are going to be smaller. So I know 4/5 is going to be greater. But let's test our theory with multiplying across. So if I multiply across, I'm going to multiply 4 times 5, which is 20. And now here, I'm going to multiply 4 times 10, which is 40. It's right. 4/5 is greater than 4/10. You can use this way when you are solving your problems today. Let's go ahead and do the guided practice together. It says over here, Mary says that 1/8 is greater than 1/4 because 8 is greater than 4. Is Mary's reasoning correct? Well, let's look at it. We have 1/8 and 1/4. First of all, I know that in 1/8 the pieces are going to be smaller, so I know that 1/4 is going to be greater. But if I want to use the new trick that Miss Cox taught me, I can multiply across, and I know 8 times 1 is 8, and 4 times 1 is 4. Since 8 is greater than 4, I know that 1/4 will be bigger. Let's do these problems over here. Number 2, just go ahead and multiply across. 8 times 3 is 24, and 4 times 6 is 24. They both have 24. That means that these fractions are equal. Now let's look at number 3. Looking at number 3, I know that 1/4 is going to be greater because 4 is going to be smaller pieces than 10. But if I multiply across, I know 4 times 1 is 4. Whoops, sorry about that. And 10 times 1 is 10. My 10 is greater, so it's going to be pointing at the 4. Now let's do number 4. 5 times 5 is 25, and 10 times 3 is 30. Therefore, this fraction is going to be greater. And last, 1/2 and 4/5. 2 times 4 is 8, and 1 times 5 is 5. So I know that 4/5 is going to be greater. You can continue to use the same method when doing the rest of the problems. Go ahead and do the rest of the problems on this page.